I'm Marilyn Darling of Fourth Quadrant Partners, and today I want to talk about two principles of learning: strengthening line of sight and making thinking visible. First, let me set the stage. Emergent learning, as we often say, is a lot more than a bag of tools. It's really a way of thinking and learning together, and in fact, I really want to emphasize today it's a language for thinking and learning together about how to achieve very complex goals in very unpredictable environments. So line of sight is about a lot more than just a goal on a piece of paper. It's really about discovering a shared aim that is so compelling that we would move mountains to get there. And it's about keeping that aim in front of us as we go and always testing our thinking against that aim rather than getting caught in the weeds. Making thinking visible is about how transparent we are with each other, about making our thinking about actions and decisions visible so that we can compare our experiences, understand each other, test our thinking, and refine it over the course of our work so that we are more likely to get to our aim, our ultimate aim. So these two principles clearly go together, and actually they're very much related by the tools that we use to get there. They both focus on two very important tools of emergent learning, which we'll talk about in a separate video: if-then hypotheses and emergent learning questions. So let me start with line of sight. We at 4QP, when we're working with a team, you'll often hear us ask the question, well, wait a second, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Or so if you do that, what will that make possible? And these are line of sight questions. What we're trying to do is really help a team keep that larger goal front and center in its conversation. When we compartmentalize our work, which we very much do in organizations, we tend to have a group that does strategy, and then there's multiple teams that are implementing different aspects of that strategy. And what we train ourselves to do too often is to shift our focus down from the real larger goal to the transactional goal that we are in charge of. So it's again, we get caught in the weeds and we kind of forget to ask, well, wait a second, are we making progress towards that larger goal that we're all working on together? So here's a definition of line of sight. Line of sight refers to creating and maintaining an unobstructed vision from our current decisions and actions to our ultimate aim. It's not just an intellectual activity, and it's not something that gets done once by a few people in a strategic planning process, and it's not something you just put on a piece of paper and forget about. It's literally the guiding light that helps engage our most creative selves to move us forward towards our aim. In 1961, John F. Kennedy famously challenged America to put a human being on the moon and bring him back safely by the end of the decade. As we all know, this was way more than a technical problem to solve. It was going to require a lot of people asking, well, geez, what is it going to take to do that? And keep asking that question and experimenting and trying things again and asking the question again in order to make it happen. And they succeeded. So one of the things about a compelling aim is that it's simple. The most compelling aims are not long lists of goals. Kennedy's aim was challenging, but it was simple and clear. You could see it, you could feel it, you could touch it, you could taste it. Whether we call it a goal or a vision or an outcome, you can tell if you've got a compelling aim just because it naturally makes you want to ask, what would it take to do that? And it's when you start asking that question at that very moment that your creative energies get unleashed. And it also sets the stage for emergent learning. So think for just a moment about some of the projects and initiatives you've worked on over the years. Which ones gave you the most juice? Where did you feel like you could ask a question or offer an idea and you would get heard? Where you could really make a contribution and everybody was doing that together? As an exercise, then, think about the opposite. Have you ever been on a team where you felt like you were a cog in the wheel, like you didn't really understand what your role was, what you were supposed to do next until somebody told you what to do? It happens. And if you just think about those two very different situations, we can achieve so much more when everybody's creative energies are unleashed And we're constantly asking, what is it going to take to do that? And what is it going to take to do that? And we feel like we can experiment and try things out because we have the authority and the agency to do that. We can bring our whole selves to tackling the big problem. So that's what line of sight is all about. So now let's talk about making thinking visible. As I said earlier, making thinking visible is about me revealing my thinking behind all of my decisions and actions, and you doing the same, so that together we can develop and test and refine our thinking, and therefore are more likely to be able to get to the aim, to the larger aim that we're aspiring to. It's kind of a question-answer dialogue. We have a goal, we ask ourselves, what do we think it will take to get there? And then we express our best thinking, which is, we call it an if-then hypothesis. We try it out. We come back and we say, did it work or didn't it? And then we ask ourselves again, well, what else do we think it would take? And we keep doing that in language. So this is what I said at the beginning of the video, that emergent learning really gives us a language to do that kind of learning together. For a lot of years, we have had one question that's really guided the development of emergent learning, and it is this. What does it take for us to learn together around the complex work we do, as well as each of us is able to do individually? And language is a big part of the answer. So individually, each of us, without ever being consciously aware of it, is exquisitely talented at learning about what we want to accomplish. I'm hungry and I want to eat. I form a strategy and I try it out. And eventually I get my parents to be able to pick me up and feed me. And later on, maybe I want to learn how to prepare a beautiful meal, and I try out a lot of recipes and I get pretty good at it, and all the other things that we do. And I may never ever talk about what I'm doing. But when we're working together around a really big challenging problem like reducing infant mortality or addressing climate change or racial inequity, we need language. We cannot do what we do naturally as individuals without talking about it. Unless we make our thinking visible to each other and we compare our experiences, agree on our hypotheses, test them out, refine our thinking, and on, we are going to be handicapped. If we don't make our thinking visible, it remains tacit, and we handicap ourselves when it comes to learning. So one of the thinkers who we often call upon is John Holland. He spent his entire career studying the difference between systems that are good at adapting and those that are not. And he observed that making learning explicit, meaning expressing and testing hypotheses versus keeping them tacit, is one of the most significant factors for the rate at which systems adapt. He describes it as an order of magnitude difference. So let's say a team is going back and forth about a strategy and they can't decide. And let's say it's a culture that's not really great on transparency. So the decision ultimately gets made probably by the person with the greatest positional authority. And maybe the results aren't great, but no one's willing to say so, and we're super busy anyhow, so we let it slide. We have handicapped our learning. Ultimately, we declare victory and we move on without learning anything, maybe besides that this is just how things get done here. So history repeats itself. So on the other hand, when we start by actively reflecting on what we know, and we express our thoughts to each other and ask questions, and so that we understand all of our best experience and thinking and turn that into the best possible hypothesis, and then deliberately test it out, and importantly, if we're not afraid to learn from our results, whether they're good or bad, then we can start to refine our thinking and our actions and see ourselves get better results over time in practice, which is incredibly self-reinforcing. So it makes us want to learn, number one, because we know we can, and number two, because we actually are seeing the results. And that's what happens if you're willing to make your thinking visible to each other. So in this video, I've tried to express the importance of and the relationship between line of sight and making thinking visible, and how they are both supported by two very important emergent learning tools, if-then hypotheses and emergent learning questions. Sort of a question-answer dialogue that helps us develop a crisp, compelling aim, and then make our thinking visible so that we can learn and experiment our way towards it. So that's those two principles. Thank you so much for your time today.